So it's day 5, and by now we should have a really good baseline understanding of what this journey is going to hold for us. We should be prepped and ready to start our challenge fasting next week. You've been working on your first challenge, which is really taking down the notes and the time to understand what is it that's going to hinder me and distract me, and what is it that is going to encourage me, to where you can use both of those things and implement the things you need to implement to encourage you in this as we go throughout the next 5 weeks, and then also to keep an eye out for what will be distracting to you, because we are fasting, so we are set and firm and solid. That's what the word fast means. We are unchanging and unmovable in this commitment to one another, in this covenant to God, that we are going to remove these physical things and replace them with spiritual things, because we know that we are spirit with a body. And as Jesus says in Matthew chapter 4, verse 4, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God, both the written words of God and the spoken words of God, and the things that God has given to us in our hearts. So as we are looking at this, we're really going to kind of break down a little bit more about fasting. You've got a pretty good foundation at this point. What does it mean? How do we do it? The replacement and the removal sides of it, the history of it. And you've been doing these times of prayer. And by now you've probably noticed as well that all of these videos are just kind of cliff note snippets or other information that is then backed up with the text underneath the videos. So I encourage you, we have intended these video sides of the devotionals to be only between, kind of up to 30 minutes, to where another 30 plus minutes that you could use during your day to have a full hour or longer devotional, that by using the text underneath, it has extra scriptures, it has more thought behind things that we want you to go dig into on your own, because in fact you are going to be replacing lots of other time, effort, and energy that you priorly would have put into physical things. You're going to be replacing it with spiritual. So we're giving you lots of extra information and things to go study on your own and kind of meditate on your own as well. But I wanted to read a Psalms together. We've been using quite a few Psalms and Proverbs, and I'm sure we will over the course of this entire journey for times of prayer and template prayer. And one of the ones that you have used is Psalms 119, but I wanted to back up one verse before one that we have used in prayer, which is, through your precepts I get understanding, and I hate every false way and cling to the righteous way. But the verse right before that, I thought kind of spoke a little bit to the idea of me of fasting, and that is Psalms 119, 103. And it says, "How sweet are your words to my taste. Oh, they are sweeter than honey to my mouth." And then it says, "Through your precepts I get understanding. Therefore I hate every false way." And I was thinking about that just for a moment as we look at fasting, and the core behind fasting, how it was in the ancient times, was a removal of physical things that sustained them and they needed, or even things that just tasted good to them. There are fasts where they just removed kind of more dessert style things or meat and things like that they desired, but they still ate other aspects. And when it says, "How sweet are your words to my taste," that they're like honey to my mouth, that thing that is sweet and I desire, and that is just completely joyous to partake of. And it's the fuel and it's the food, it's the taste of everything. And in Psalms right there, I believe what the psalmist is kind of showing us and writing to us is that there's a sense of our spirit desiring because it is good and it tastes good, if you will, to our spirit. And in fasting, what we're trying to do is we're saying, hey, we're going to remove this other thing and we're going to replace it with this thing. Remove this natural thing, replace it with this spiritual thing. And it's kind of like replacing the food or the fuel source, right? What fuels us? Again, as Jesus said, is life not more than meat? That's Matthew chapter 6. Is life not more than meat? Is it not more than the natural desires and the natural consuming of things? There's something more about you. You are spirit. And I know you may get tired of hearing that, but we've got to keep our mind just frameworked into this idea that is indeed where we are and who we are. And when you think about the fuel and the food, we feed ourselves multiple times a day just to keep our body sustained to do basic tasks, to do the most basic of things. And then we see our spirit, it works the same way. We are to feed our spirit to do the basic tasks. The reason that most of us find it so difficult to stay dedicated in things like prayer and study and conversation on the things of God, or even thinking the way Christ thinks, we're like, I shouldn't think about this person that way. I should look at them, with the love of Christ. Like, why am I finding this so difficult? It's in fact because we can't do the basic tasks that Christ has asked of us because we have not been feeding our spirit the food, the fuel that it needs. And so it's running on empty, if you will, or even running on poor fuel, bad fuel. And it kind of brings my mind, I drive a diesel truck, and if you know anything about diesels and gasoline engines, you cannot swap the two gasolines, the fuel and the gasoline. You cannot do that. Neither one will run properly, and it will destroy a diesel engine for sure if you do that. And that's kind of how we find ourselves. If we are spirit, we are running on the wrong fuel. We have been filling ourselves up with kind of nonsense things, whether it be things of this world or even just other things that are quote unquote things of God, but they're not really nutritious to us. We're eating a lot of Little Debbie snacks, if we even are eating anything spiritual. And we're running on the wrong fuel, so we find ourselves incapable of sticking to and actually doing the base things that Christ has asked of us. And that's exactly what we're doing in this journey, is saying we're going to remove all those things and start running on the proper fuel, the spiritual fuel, because that is who we are. We are a spirit with a body. And so as we're kind of looking into what we're about to start with this next fast, the next thing I want to kind of answer for you is a little bit of this idea of the food fuel source, kind of an idea and concept in John chapter 6. We want to look at something that Jesus is talking about here when he is speaking about this food source kind of fuel idea. Granted, he didn't use the analogy of fuel because they didn't have vehicles, but food being the sustaining nature and the thing that you run off of. So let's look at John chapter 6 together. So John chapter 6 verse 30 is where we're going to begin. Jesus is speaking right now to a group of people. They're kind of a multitude of people. His disciples are mixed up in there as well, and he's speaking to them, and this is what they say to him. They say to Jesus, "What sign will you show us that we can believe that you are who you say you are? What work will you perform? Our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave bread from heaven to them for them to eat." So they're referring to the children of Israel in the wilderness. And verse 32, Jesus responds to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven." Verse 33, "For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And they said unto him, Sir, give us this bread always. And Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes will not thirst. But I say to you that you have seen me, and you do not believe." And so what is Jesus talking about here? He's using the idea about, they're saying, hey, what are you going to do? What are you going to show us that we could believe in you? And they say, because, even Moses, right? We got manna from heaven talking about the children of Israel. That they got a sign to know that Moses was the guy from God, and it provided for them. It sustained them in the wilderness. And Jesus' response, he doesn't do the loaves and the fishes like we're all so, used to hearing, which there's some interesting things about that with the loaves and fishes. The only reason he fed them through that miraculous way was because they were there trying to eat of the spiritual things. So he fed them naturally to keep them there so he could continue to speak and to minister to them. So it wasn't just him showing off to show them a sign. There was a purpose behind it. That purpose actually was they were spiritually being fed. So he naturally fed them to allow the spiritual side. But here he uses that same thing. They say, hey, that's what our ancestors got. Show us something, do something, right? Show us something that sustains us. And he says, here's how you know God has sent you the true bread of life. And they say, okay, well, give it to us. And he says, that's me. It is the very life that I'm living, the very way I'm doing it. Everything about what I'm here to do is the sustaining nature of what it means to be a real human, is the sustaining nature of what it is to live. And he says, hey, if I'm the bread of life, whoever comes to me will not hunger. Now, what does it mean to come to? him. That doesn't just mean, oh, I said a prayer, like that's what a lot of us think in our modern day. Oh, I said a prayer, or come to me, like, oh, you came and heard me speak. But Jesus is saying this idea of come, if you look at it in the Greek, is the idea to come under the mission, like almost like a submission to or an obedience to. Come to me, come near to me, and follow and work and go with me. And these journeys that we're doing, this one right here in Detox, is to teach us the way of Christ, to practice the very way of Christ, which is fasting in a part of our spiritual discipline and our spiritual walk. And so we are learning what that is, because he says, if you come to me and do life the way I do it, you won't hunger again, because there's true sustaining. It's the right fuel for a spirit, is to live with this at its core. And then he says, if you believe, you will not thirst again, kind of tying to the other side of the sustaining nature of it. And so we're seeing here that Jesus seems to tie your very core being existence, the real stuff of life, he ties it to your spiritual walk, not just natural substance. And he says, yes, of course you got to eat. Of course you got to, because you're in this world, but you're not of it. You are a spirit in this natural world. So feed your spirit. And that's where we find ourselves running on the wrong fuel. And so we don't find ourselves capable to do the basic functions that a Christ follower should do. And throughout this journey, you are going to develop new skills, new understandings, and new practices to allow you to walk that out.